Boneshatter Juggernaut. So I've made a couple Boneshatter builds over the past couple leagues. This character is insane. Boneshatter is one of the best league starts you can have. It's been that way for a couple leagues, and to be honest, it'll be that way this league as well. Not much has changed. It hasn't been nerfed. It's still just as good as it was before. The tree has not changed at all. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I do want to mention a couple of nodes that are important. Early on, I recommend you rush Lust for Carnage. This gives you a lot of attack speed. Not sure if you guys have played a Marauder before, but if you don't have attack speed early on, you are really slow. It's kind of painful, to be honest, compared to some other classes. But yeah, get some Lust for Carnage on your trait. You'll remove this later on. It's very solid for early on, though. Speaking of leveling, Spectral Throw is actually quite good for leveling now. It got buffed last league, and people have figured out that it's actually quite nice for leveling in the early campaign. Act 1 to 4 especially are really strong with it. You want to be using a two-hander, and it'll just carry you pretty much through the campaign. At least the first part. Once you get to Act 5, it kind of falls off a bit, and you might have to switch to Helix or Sunder. But you're basically just waiting until you get enough gear / the attack required to switch to Boneshatter. Now, what are you looking for before you switch to Boneshatter? When you switch to Boneshatter, you're really looking to get inexorable on the tree. This gives you your endurance charges, so you have a bunch of phys damage reduction, and armor while stationary. This is actually always up when you're attacking, which is nice. The other big thing you want to have is Untiring. Untiring is how you get that HP that you've lost back. It gives you a ton of recovery. Basically, all the damage you're taking is recovered. And yeah, you just want to have a bunch of armor, so make sure you're running Determination and have armor gear. And that's kind of how you swap to Boneshatter. Some people like to swap in Block Aqueducts, but you can actually swap earlier if you have all that stuff. Endgame. So I have it a POB here. This is like a league start POB. We're using Hinakora's Sight. A lot of people probably don't know why I'm using this. This is a budget item. This is how you work in precise techniques super early on without having to have insane gear. Later on, you can replace this, but yeah, this will just enable you to have precise technique basically early on. Later on, you get like your accuracy on your rings, your helmet, your belt jewel. There's a lot of ways to get accuracy later, but it's kind of a struggle until you have the gear, basically. Some options endgame. I do quickly want to talk about some of the defensive options and how you scale the build past this. Now, the big way you scale the build past this damage, and to be honest, this damage is already really good. Like, if you look at the endgame POB, the damage is already really insane. But you can actually get way more damage. Like, you could get like 50 million DPS on this build relatively easily if you use the tech. Now, the tech I'm talking about is Ashes of the Stars. Ashes of the Stars plus alt quality. Now, Boneshatter has an alt quality called Diversion Boneshatter. This gives you attack speed per trauma. Comboed with the Helm enchant, which gives you additional trauma stacks, you have insane trauma. It gives you like 60 plus. Very crazy strategy. There is a downside here. You end up taking a lot of damage, so the gear requirement is really high. You'll need a lot of phys reduction. Stuff like endurance charges, you have to take endurance charges on the tree. The ones you're right next to, you need those for sure. You'll need to get lots of PDR, like PDR on your chest. Phys taking his Ellie on your chest. Phys taking his Ellie on your helmet, / helmet implicit. Basically, any way you can reduce the phys damage taking, you want to have it if you have the strategy. Kind of already that way, but it's even more so if you go for this strat. Leech Mastery. I do want to quickly talk about this. This is also something you probably end up having to do if you go for the Ashes. Or if you have if you're struggling with trauma stacks at all, you'll basically want to have this Leech Mastery. 25% of damage taken recoup his life. Recoup is actually quite good with Boneshatter. There's not really that many ways to get it on this side of the tree though. And yeah, Vitality Void with the Leech Mastery is one of those ways. 25% is quite a bit. Defensive options. There is quite a few new options you can do defensively. You can go Suppression, which is the base tree. Suppression isn't really required as Juggernaut until you enter red maps or maybe Pinnacle bosses. The way you get Suppression is Entrench on the tree, the Anoint. We have an Instinct Anointed right now. You probably just Anoint in better rate though. And Gear. It's kind of annoying to do, but Suppression's just so solid. There's a couple other options though. You could not go Suppression and run a pure armor chest with something like Eternal Damnation. This would mean you don't have Ashes. This is more of a hardcore setup. That is very strong defensively though. Eternal Damnation basically gives you a ton of Ellie mitigation if you have cap Chaos Res. It's very, very good. But yeah, if you don't want to do that, you can also do Divine Flesh, 4th Vow. This is another option. This is also kind of hard to run if you're running Ashes though, because you don't have a big armor chest with like PDR and stuff. But this also makes your armor apply to chaos damage from hits, and Divine Flesh converts your half your elemental damage into chaos damage. That's another tech you can do. Both these are kind of hard to run with Ashes. You can still probably do it with the fourth vow. You can't do it with the Eternal Damnation. Those are some defensive options that you can go through. Personally, I would probably just go Suppression and like a big armor chest, and maybe go for Ashes later. But yeah, if you feel like you're squishy on hardcore, these are some options for sure. Or if you just really want to be really tanky, something you can do. Death Rush. So we are using Death Rush in this POB. This is a mapping item. You could go for Tanyarahi. This would be fine as well. This current POB doesn't have suppression on the helmet, so you just have to put that there instead. If you can get away with having this on, it probably is actually worth using. Tanyarahi is really insane. Basically, anytime you heal with Leech, you gain Adrenaline Onslaught. And since you're doing damage to yourself, you pretty much are always leeching. So it's very solid as well. Something to consider, and maybe you want to put it in your POB. I think that's most of what I want to talk about for gear. So like I said, the tree hasn't really changed that much. If you want to watch the old video, I go through the tree like point by point. The tree's been the same for like 3 or 4 leagues. I guess the other thing I do want to talk about for the tree is actually Panopticon and the Mastery. I didn't really talk about this last time. The Totem Mastery is actually quite nice. If you're using Panopticon for mapping, you just put your totems down and you get the buff Linger, which is really nice for mapping and bossing. Something to consider as well. And yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. Boneshatter's just insane. So you're not gonna have a bad league start if you play Boneshatter. If you don't like melee, you might not like it. It is a little clunky in some situations, like leftover monsters and stuff. But if you've ever played melee, I mean, Boneshatter is one of the best melee skills. So you're not gonna have a bad time. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.